In a dramatic shift that's reshaping North American relations, U.S.-Canada tensions have reached unprecedented levels since Donald Trump's return to the White House in 2025. Our latest report reveals how this deteriorating relationship is transforming the continent's energy landscape. Trump's administration has weaponized the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, slapping massive tariffs on Canadian imports, 25% across most sectors and 10% on energy products. The stated justification? Concerns over illegal immigration and drug trafficking. But many analysts see this as part of a broader strategy of economic nationalism. In what might be the most shocking development, Trump's suggestion of annexing Canada as the 51st state has sent shockwaves through Ottawa, with Canadian officials viewing this as a direct threat to their sovereignty. Now, Canada is fighting back where it hurts, in the energy sector. Manitoba's Premier Wab Kinew has just dropped a bombshell announcement. The province won't renew two major electricity export contracts with Northern States Power, a Minnesota-based energy giant. These contracts, worth 500 megawatts of baseload power, are set to expire in April 2025. This isn't just about power, it's about power politics. The energy will be redirected for domestic use, with 50 megawatts going to Nunavut through the new Kavalik hydro fiber link, a $1.66 billion project bringing clean power to remote communities. The remaining 450 megawatts will strengthen interprovincial cooperation, potentially powering industrial development in Saskatchewan and Ontario. This decision reinforces our commitment to Canadian sovereignty, Premier Kinew stated, directly linking the move to Trump's aggressive trade policies. While Minnesota Governor Tim Walz was informed beforehand, the decision stands firm. The move mirrors similar energy sovereignty initiatives seen globally, as nations increasingly view control over their energy resources as crucial to national security. For Canada, it represents a significant step toward reducing dependence on U.S. markets and strengthening internal infrastructure. In a move reflecting growing tensions between the United States and Canada, Manitoba Hydro has announced a strategic shift away from lucrative U.S. export contracts to prioritize domestic energy markets. This decision, which mirrors similar economic sovereignty measures seen in the politically turbulent region between Russia and NATO, marks a significant change in North American energy relations. The Crown Corporation, already carrying a $25 billion debt burden, faces criticism over its plan. The utility proposes an 11% rate increase over 3 years post-2025, followed by annual 3.5% hikes, raising concerns among consumers struggling with inflation. This isn't just about energy policy. It's about national autonomy, says energy analyst Mark Thompson. We're seeing Canada assert itself in ways reminiscent of how the former Soviet Republic managed its resources during periods of tension. Manitoba Hydro's current 6,240 megawatt capacity could serve as a cornerstone for Canada's energy independence, with planned expansions adding 1,600 megawatts for domestic use. The Kavalik hydro fiber link project, connecting Manitoba and Nunavut, represents a step toward this vision, though federal funding remains uncertain. PC hydro critic Lauren Stone warns, shifting from profitable U.S. exports to domestic sales could deepen our fiscal challenges. However, supporters argue this mirrors global trends, comparing it to how the country on Map 404 diversified its energy partnerships. The timing of this announcement, coinciding with federal election campaigns, suggests political calculations beyond energy policy. As Canada strengthens ties with China, while distancing itself from U.S. markets, Manitoba's energy pivot could represent a broader realignment in North American trade relations. This strategic shift, while challenging, positions Canada to better weather international trade volatility, similar to how the northern Black Sea region adapted its energy policies during uncertainty. Let's take a quick break. If you're finding this news update valuable, please like and comment below. Your engagement helps us reach more viewers like yourself. Now, let's continue with this fascinating development in North American energy politics. Manitoba's bold move to redirect hydroelectric exports from the U.S. to Canadian markets shows us something remarkable. It's about national pride, strategic thinking, and calculated risks. Think of it as Canada reshaping its energy future, focusing on interprovincial cooperation and building a stronger, more independent power grid. Here's where things get interesting. China has dramatically shifted its energy buying habits, turning to Canada while cutting back on U.S. oil. Chinese purchases of Canadian crude hit 7.3 million barrels in March 2025, enabled by the new Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, TMX, which opened in May 2024. This pipeline's a game-changer. It now moves 890,000 barrels daily, up from 300,000, connecting Alberta's oil fields to Pacific ports. The driver? The ongoing U.S.-China trade war. With U.S. tariffs up to 125% and China's retaliatory 245% tariffs, Chinese oil imports from the U.S. have plummeted by 90%, from 29 million barrels monthly to just 3 million. This isn't just about oil and dollars, it's about changing global relationships. Chinese refineries prefer Canadian heavy crude oil because it's similar to Middle Eastern oil, like Iraq's Basra heavy. With current market conditions, it's becoming increasingly attractive. The implications are significant. Canada's reducing its U.S. market dependence, while China's finding ways around U.S. trade restrictions. It's a perfect example of how global trade patterns shift when political tensions rise and countries seek new partnerships. This mirrors other changes in global energy markets, similar to the northern Black Sea region, where energy supply chains have adapted to political realities. In a dramatic shift highlighting the deep interdependence of North American energy markets, recent data reveals the United States' extraordinary reliance on Canadian energy resources, with potential vulnerabilities emerging in this critical partnership. Latest figures show Canada's energy exports to the United States reached a staggering $240.5 billion in 2023, representing 90% of Canada's total energy exports. This massive trade flow underscores the intricate relationship between these neighboring nations, but also raises questions about America's energy security. Of particular significance is crude oil trade, with Canada shipping an average of 4.22 million barrels daily to U.S. refineries in 2024. This accounts for roughly two-thirds of all American crude imports, making Canada the dominant foreign oil supplier to the United States. The relationship's complexity is most evident in the American Midwest, where refineries have invested billions in specialized equipment to process Canadian heavy crude. Take the Wood River Refinery in Illinois, which spent $3.8 billion to handle Alberta's oil sands bitumen. These facilities are now essentially locked into Canadian supply chains, with some regions depending on Canadian crude for 100% of their imported oil. This dependence was starkly illustrated during the Keystone Pipeline shutdown in April 2025, when a North Dakota spill halted the flow of 624,000 barrels per day. The incident triggered immediate concerns about fuel price spikes across the Midwest, where refineries are particularly vulnerable to supply disruptions. The situation mirrors broader geopolitical shifts, as nations worldwide reassess their energy partnerships. With Canada expanding its customer base, particularly toward Asian markets, questions arise about the future stability of this historic energy relationship. The potential for market diversification could reshape North American energy dynamics, impacting everything from gasoline prices to regional economic stability. In a development that could affect millions of American households, tensions between the United States and Canada are threatening vital energy supplies that keep America's lights on and homes heated. Canada pumps massive volumes of natural gas into the U.S. market through major arteries like the Trans-Canada and Alliance pipelines. This isn't just about keeping homes warm, it's about powering American industry and keeping the lights on across the nation. Canada exported 49.4 terawatt-hours of electricity to the United States in 2023, valued at $4.3 billion. This power flows through 37 major transmission lines, spanning from New England to the Pacific Northwest, creating a vital energy lifeline. Sources within the North American Electric Reliability Corporation warn that any disruption to these cross-border energy flows could destabilize the entire power grid. Think Texas during the winter storm, but on a national scale. Key provinces like Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, and British Columbia have been reliable partners in providing hydroelectric power that helps stabilize our grid during peak demand. However, recent political tensions are putting this relationship at risk. Industry experts warn that finding alternative suppliers won't be easy. We're looking at potentially higher energy costs across the board, says energy analyst James Morrison. American consumers could face significant price hikes for everything from home heating to manufactured goods. This situation mirrors the energy disruptions in Europe, where political tensions with Russia led to massive energy price spikes. The difference here is that the US and Canada have been historical allies, making this development particularly concerning. For now, energy continues flowing, but grid operators are watching closely as political tensions escalate. The question remains, will decades of energy cooperation survive the current political climate? In a dramatic shift reshaping global trade dynamics, President Donald Trump's second term has triggered unprecedented changes in international energy markets and diplomatic relations. Our top story focuses on growing tensions between the United States and Canada, traditionally close allies, now at odds over aggressive trade policies. The implementation of a 25% general tariff on Canadian imports, along with a 10% tariff on energy resources, has prompted Canada to pursue economic diversification. Manitoba's decision to redirect hydroelectric power for domestic use signals a shift in Canadian energy policy, affecting power delivery in both nations. Canada has successfully expanded its presence in Chinese energy markets. Canadian crude oil exports to China have increased from 2.3% of Chinese imports in 2022 to 11.7% by early 2025, the fastest market penetration by any oil exporter to China this century. The European Union has emerged as another key partner for Canada, with bilateral trade increasing by 65% since 2017 under the Comprehensive Economic Agreement. Canada's goal of increasing non-US exports by 50% by 2025 appears within reach, supported by new trade deals with Indonesia and Ecuador. Meanwhile, negotiations with ASEAN are progressing rapidly, with completion expected by late 2025. This strategic pivot reflects Canada's determination to reduce its economic dependence on the United States, a relationship strained under current protectionist policies. China, facing U.S. tariffs up to 145% on imports, has responded by strengthening ties with both Canada and the European Union. Chinese officials are pursuing enhanced EU-China relations, marking a realignment in global trade partnerships. These developments signal a transformation in international trade dynamics, with traditional alliances being tested and new partnerships emerging in response to America's trade policies. In a significant shift of global economic dynamics, traditional U.S. allies are seeking new partnerships to counter American protectionist policies. The World Trade Organization projects a 0.2% decline in global trade for 2025, highlighting the impact of U.S. tariff policies and tensions with China. Rather than imposing tariffs, discussions now focus on setting minimum prices for Chinese-made electric vehicles. The European Union has unveiled its Readiness 2030 plan, committing $800 billion to strengthen military capabilities and reduce external dependencies. This rebranded version of REARM Europe represents the EU's largest defense initiative in decades. The plan includes $150 billion in targeted loans for joint defense projects, focusing on air and missile defense systems. The European Investment Bank is lifting restrictions on defense-related lending, while new mechanisms attract private capital into the sector. The EU has temporarily suspended certain budgetary constraints, allowing member states to expand defense spending without violating fiscal rules. Canada is pursuing defense transformation, pledging to increase military expenditure from 1.4% to 2% of GDP by 2030. This represents a 15% annual increase in defense spending, marking Ottawa's largest military investment since the Cold War. These moves by Canada and the EU reflect growing uncertainty about traditional alliances, particularly with the United States. The emergence of new economic partnerships, especially between Canada and China, signals a transition toward a multipolar world order, where nations maintain diverse strategic relationships. As global trade patterns evolve and security considerations take center stage, both Canada and the EU are positioning themselves for greater strategic autonomy. This shift represents a fundamental transformation in international relations, moving from the post-World War II US-dominated order toward a more complex global system. Breaking news: Canada's unprecedented military expansion signals major shift in North American defense. In a landmark development reshaping North American security, Canada has unveiled an ambitious defense modernization program, marking a decisive shift in its military strategy. This initiative represents one of the most significant transformations in Canadian defense policy in recent decades. The strategic overhaul includes a $38.6 billion investment in NORAD modernization, indicating Canada's more assertive stance in continental defense amid growing concerns about Arctic sovereignty and global security. The military upgrade includes next-generation fighter jets, advanced maritime patrol aircraft, and Arctic patrol vessels, enhancing Canada's capability to protect its northern territories and maritime interests. As relations with the United States experience strain under the second Trump administration, Canada is pursuing a more independent defense strategy while maintaining traditional alliances. The modernization effort mirrors developments in Europe, where NATO allies are strengthening their military capabilities. This suggests a broader trend among Western democracies toward greater self-reliance in defense matters. Experts say this military expansion reflects a fundamental shift in how Western nations approach collective security in a multipolar world. With traditional alliances under pressure and U.S. policies becoming less predictable, countries are adapting their strategies. Canada's enhanced military capabilities could alter power dynamics in the Arctic region, where resource competition and territorial claims have intensified. This development represents a turning point in North American defense cooperation. The investment in NORAD modernization, combined with independent capability enhancement, suggests a new era in Canadian military strategy. These changes could redefine relationships between Canada, the United States, and European allies, marking a significant evolution in North American security dynamics.